Look, right now at this very moment, there are hardware settings enabled on your computer that are actively harming your performance, destroying your privacy, and in some cases, literally damaging your hardware over time. And the worst part? Most people have no idea these settings even exist, let alone that they should be disabled immediately. I'm not talking about software tweaks or registry hacks. I'm talking about fundamental hardware configuration settings that are enabled by default, that manufacturers and operating system developers never tell you about, that are silently working against you every single day you use your computer. So stop what you're doing and pay attention, because what I'm about to show you will make your computer faster, more stable, more secure, and potentially last years longer than it would otherwise. These aren't minor optimizations. These are critical settings that have measurable, dramatic impacts on how your system performs and how your data is protected. And the crazy thing is that every single one of these settings is enabled by default on most computers, which means right now, as you're reading this, your hardware is probably configured in ways that benefit manufacturers and software companies at your expense. Let's fix that immediately. Hardware setting number 1 that you need to disable right now is Intel Management Engine, or AMD Platform Security Processor, depending on whether you have an Intel or AMD system. This is a subsystem that runs independently of your main processor, has its own operating system, has access to your network interface, can read your RAM, can access your storage, and operates even when your computer is turned off as long as it's connected to power. Yeah, you heard that right. There's a processor inside your processor that's always running, always connected, always monitoring, and you have no control over what it's doing. Intel Management Engine, or IME, was originally designed for enterprise remote management, allowing IT departments to troubleshoot and control computers remotely. But it's included in every Intel processor for the past 15 years, active on consumer machines where remote management makes no sense. Security researchers have found multiple vulnerabilities in IME over the years, some of which allow complete remote compromise of affected systems. The NSA reportedly uses IME and similar technologies for surveillance. And even if you're not worried about government spying, the fact that there's a black box processor running hidden code with full access to your system should deeply concern you. AMD's equivalent is called Platform Security Processor, or PSP, and it has the same problems. Hidden processor, proprietary code, runs independently, has extensive system access, history of security vulnerabilities. Both Intel and AMD claim these subsystems are necessary for security features like encryption and secure boot, but in practice, they're security nightmares waiting to be exploited. And here's the thing, you can't fully disable them through Windows settings or BIOS on most systems. The manufacturers deliberately make it difficult or impossible to turn off because these subsystems serve their interests, not yours. What you can do is minimize their functionality. Enter your BIOS or UEFI settings by pressing the appropriate key during boot, usually F2, F10, DEL, or ESC, depending on your manufacturer. Look for settings related to Intel Management Engine, AMT, Active Management Technology, Intel ME, or on AMD systems, PSP. Disable everything you can find. Some systems allow you to set ME to a minimal or disabled state. Some require BIOS updates to expose these options. And some manufacturers don't give you access to these settings at all, which tells you everything you need to know about who they think owns your computer. For advanced users, there are tools like ME Cleaner for Intel systems that can neutralize the management engine at a firmware level, but this requires flashing modified BIOS firmware and can brick your computer if done incorrectly. It's not for beginners. But at minimum, go into your BIOS and disable every AMT, VEEP Pro, and ME related setting you can access. Your system doesn't need these features. They exist to benefit manufacturers and enterprise management, not you. Hardware setting number 2 is fast startup in Windows, and this one is enabled by default on every Windows installation. Fast startup sounds beneficial, right? Faster boot times are good. Except fast startup isn't actually fast, and it causes more problems than it solves. Here's what fast startup actually does. Instead of performing a complete shutdown when you turn off your computer, Windows hibernates the kernel session, saving the state of system drivers and the kernel to your hard drive. When you boot up, Windows loads this hibernation file instead of performing a clean boot, which can be slightly faster, but creates massive problems. First, fast startup prevents Windows from performing a clean hardware initialization during boot. Drivers don't reload cleanly, hardware states don't reset properly. This causes issues with USB devices not being recognized, network adapters failing to connect, audio problems, Bluetooth failures. Basically any peripheral device can have problems because it wasn't properly initialized during boot. I can't tell you how many tech support problems I've solved over the years by simply disabling fast startup. It's the root cause of countless mysterious hardware issues that disappear when you force Windows to actually shut down and boot up properly. Second, fast startup interferes with dual boot systems. If you have Windows and Linux installed on the same computer, and Windows shuts down with fast startup enabled, the Linux partition can become unmountable or corrupted because Windows didn't properly release file system locks. If you ever get file system errors when trying to access Windows partitions from Linux, fast startup is usually the culprit. Third, fast startup makes Windows updates less reliable. Updates often don't fully apply because the system isn't cleanly restarting. You end up with partially installed updates, inconsistent system states, and the need to manually restart multiple times to get updates to actually complete. Fourth, fast startup increases wear on your SSD or hard drive because it's constantly writing and reading large hibernation files. These files can be several gigabytes in size, and they're written to disk every time you shut down and read every time you boot. That's unnecessary write cycles that reduce your drive's lifespan. And fifth, fast startup prevents BIOS updates and firmware changes from taking effect properly. If you update your BIOS or change settings and then shut down with fast startup, Windows might load the old kernel state that doesn't recognize the new firmware, causing conflicts. Here's how to disable fast startup immediately. Open Control Panel. Go to Power Options. Click on Choose what the power buttons do on the left side. Click Change settings that are currently unavailable at the top. And uncheck the box that says Turn on fast startup, recommended. Click Save Changes and you're done. From now on, when you shut down Windows, it will perform a complete shutdown. When you boot up, it will perform a complete boot with proper hardware initialization. Yes, boot times might be a few seconds longer, but your system will be dramatically more stable and reliable. Hardware setting number 3 is hardware acceleration in web browsers and applications, and this one is particularly insidious because it sounds like something you'd want enabled. Hardware acceleration uses your GPU instead of your CPU for certain tasks like video decoding and rendering, which in theory should improve performance and reduce CPU load. And on some systems with powerful dedicated GPUs, it does help. But on most systems, especially those with integrated graphics or older dedicated GPUs, hardware acceleration causes more problems than it solves. First, hardware acceleration creates a pathway for websites and applications to fingerprint your system by querying detailed information about your GPU. This information includes your GPU model, driver version, rendering capabilities, and other technical details that create a unique identifier for your system. Websites use this for targeted advertising and tracking across the internet, even when you're using privacy protection tools. Hardware acceleration essentially bypasses many privacy protections by creating a hardware-based fingerprint. Second, hardware acceleration often causes stability issues. Browser crashes, video playback problems, screen flickering, graphical glitches, frozen tabs. These are frequently caused by buggy GPU drivers or incompatibilities between the browser's hardware acceleration code and your specific GPU. Disabling hardware acceleration eliminates an entire category of potential problems. Third, hardware acceleration can actually reduce performance on systems with weak GPUs. If your integrated graphics are already struggling to handle Windows desktop composition and your display output, offloading browser rendering to that same GPU doesn't help. It just creates resource contention. Fourth, hardware acceleration enables vulnerabilities like Spectre and Meltdown to be exploited through web browsers. These vulnerabilities allow malicious websites to potentially read memory from other processes by exploiting timing differences in GPU operations. Disabling hardware acceleration closes this attack vector. And fifth, hardware acceleration increases power consumption on laptops. Your GPU uses significantly more power than your CPU for these tasks, reducing battery life. If you're on battery power, hardware acceleration is actively working against you. Here's how to disable it. In Chrome and Edge, go to Settings, search for hardware acceleration, and toggle off Use hardware acceleration when available. In Firefox, go to Settings, scroll down to Performance, uncheck Use recommended performance settings, and then uncheck Use hardware acceleration when available. Restart your browser and you'll notice pages load more smoothly, crashes become much rarer, and tracking becomes more difficult. Do the same for desktop applications. In Discord, go to User Settings, Advanced, and disable hardware acceleration. In Spotify, Preferences, scroll to Compatibility, and disable hardware acceleration. In Microsoft Teams, Settings, General, turn off GPU hardware acceleration. Most applications that use hardware acceleration have a setting to disable it. Go through your commonly used apps and turn it off. Your system will thank you. Hardware setting number 4 is Peripheral Device Power Management, specifically the setting that allows Windows to turn off USB devices to save power. This setting is enabled by default on laptops and causes endless frustration with external devices disconnecting randomly, not waking up properly, failing to be recognized, and generally behaving unreliably. The idea behind this setting is that Windows can turn off power to USB ports when devices are idle to save battery. In practice, it creates a nightmare of compatibility issues. Your mouse might stop working randomly and require unplugging and replugging. Your keyboard might disconnect during use. Your external hard drive might spin down and become inaccessible. Your webcam might fail during video calls. Your printer might go offline and require a restart. All of these problems are caused by Windows' aggressive power management turning off USB devices inappropriately. And the battery savings? Negligible. The amount of power drawn by USB peripherals is tiny compared to your display, CPU, and other major components. You're trading massive inconvenience for maybe 2 minutes of extra battery life. Here's how to fix it. Open Device Manager by right-clicking the Start button and selecting Device Manager. Expand Universal Serial Bus Controllers. You'll see a list of USB root hubs and USB controllers. Right-click each one, select Properties, go to the Power Management tab, and uncheck Allow the computer to turn off this device to save power. Do this for every USB controller in the list. This takes a few minutes, but it's absolutely worth it. While you're in Device Manager, do the same for your network adapters. Expand Network Adapters. Right-click your Wi-Fi and Ethernet adapters, Properties, Power Management, uncheck the box. This prevents Windows from turning off your network connection to save power, which can cause disconnections, slow reconnection times, and failed network operations. Also do it for your Bluetooth adapter if you have one. Basically, go through Device Manager and disable power management for any device where unexpected disconnection would be problematic. The only devices where you might want to keep power management enabled are things like external hard drives that you specifically want to spin down when not in use to reduce wear. But for peripherals you use regularly, disable power management. The stability improvement is immediate and dramatic. Hardware setting number 5, and this is the big one that almost nobody knows about, is your network adapter's advanced properties, specifically settings related to power management, packet coalescing, and flow control that are configured for power saving at the expense of performance and privacy. Your network adapter has dozens of settings that most users never see, and the default values are tuned for maximum power efficiency, not optimal performance or security. Open Device Manager, expand Network Adapters, right-click your network adapter, select Properties, click the Advanced tab. You'll see a long list of settings with cryptic names. Here are the critical ones to change. Find Power Saving Mode or Energy Efficient Ethernet and set it to Disabled. This prevents your network adapter from entering low power states that cause latency spikes and connection drops. Find Flow Control and set it to Disabled. Flow control can cause buffer bloat and increased latency in online gaming and video calls. Find Interrupt Moderation, or Interrupt Throttle Rate, and set it to Disabled, or to the lowest value. This setting batches network interrupts to reduce CPU overhead, but it increases latency. For real-time applications like gaming or video conferencing, you want interrupts processed immediately, not batched. Find Packet Coalescing, or Receive Side Scaling, and disable it if you have a single-core or dual-core CPU. These features are designed for multi-core processors and can actually hurt performance on older systems. Find Wake on Magic Packet, or Wake on LAN, and disable it unless you specifically need remote wake functionality. This feature allows your computer to be woken from sleep or hibernation by network packets, which sounds convenient but creates security risks. Malicious actors can potentially wake your computer remotely or use Wake on LAN packets to map your network. Unless you're in an enterprise environment where IT needs to wake your computer remotely, turn it off. Find Large Send Offload, or LSO, and set it to Disabled. This feature offloads TCP segmentation to your network card to reduce CPU usage, but it can cause compatibility issues with certain routers and firewalls, resulting in connection problems and slow speeds. Find IPv4 checksum offload and TCP checksum offload and disable them. These offload checksum calculations to the network adapter, but if your adapter has buggy firmware, it can calculate checksums incorrectly, causing packet corruption and connection failures that are nearly impossible to diagnose. After changing these settings, click OK and restart your computer for all changes to take effect. You'll notice improved network stability, lower latency, fewer random disconnections, and better overall performance. Yes, your CPU usage might increase slightly because it's now handling tasks that were previously offloaded to the network adapter. But on any remotely modern processor, this is negligible. The stability and performance improvements far outweigh the minor increase in CPU load. One more network-related setting to check. Open Network and Sharing Center, click on your network connection, click Properties, and make sure you have only the necessary protocols enabled. You should have Internet Protocol version 4, TCP IPv4 checked. You probably need Internet Protocol version 6, TCP IPv6 checked, unless you specifically know your network doesn't use IPv6, but uncheck everything else unless you specifically need it. File and printer sharing, Microsoft Network Client and Server, All of this should be disabled unless you're on a trusted network where you actually share files and printers. These protocols create attack surfaces and slow down your network connection. Now, let me tell you why these 5 hardware settings matter so much and why manufacturers enable them by default, even though they cause problems. It's simple. Power consumption and corporate partnerships. Manufacturers want to advertise low power consumption and long battery life, so they enable aggressive power management features that sacrifice stability and performance. They want to enable remote management capabilities, so they include subsystems like Intel ME that serve enterprise interests but harm consumer privacy and security. Software companies like Microsoft partner with hardware manufacturers and configure default settings that benefit their telemetry and tracking systems. Hardware acceleration enables fingerprinting. Network adapters configured for power saving create connection patterns that can be monitored. Fast startup allows persistent surveillance across supposed shutdown events. These aren't accidents. These are deliberate configuration choices that prioritize corporate interests over user interests. Your computer is capable of running faster, more stable, more private, and more secure than it currently does. The only thing preventing that is default hardware settings configured for someone else's benefit. By disabling these 5 settings, Intel Management Engine features, fast startup, hardware acceleration, USB power management, and network adapter power saving, you take back control, improve performance, enhance privacy, and increase reliability. This takes maybe 30 minutes total to configure, and the improvements last as long as you own the computer. Don't accept default settings as optimal. They're not. They're compromises designed to serve manufacturers and software companies, not you. Question every default. Investigate every setting. Take the time to understand what your hardware is actually doing and configure it to serve your interests. Your computer should work for you, not against you. These 5 settings are working against you right now. Go disable them immediately. Open your BIOS, open Device Manager, open your browser settings, and systematically disable every one of these problematic hardware configurations. You'll notice the difference within minutes. Boot times might be slightly longer without fast startup, but your system will be stable. USB devices will work reliably without power management shutdowns. Your browser will stop fingerprinting you through hardware acceleration. Your network will perform better without aggressive power saving, and your system will be more secure without Intel ME actively running. These are concrete, measurable improvements that anyone can achieve with basic configuration changes. Stop letting default settings control your computing experience. Stop accepting poor performance and privacy invasion as normal. Stop trusting that manufacturers configured your hardware optimally. They didn't. They configured it for their benefit. Now configure it for yours. 5 hardware settings. Disable them now. Your computer will thank you, your privacy will improve, your performance will increase, and you'll wonder why you tolerated the default configuration for so long. Make the changes today.